The sixth consecutive month of unusual drought had transformed Oakridge Valley Farm into a desperate gamble rather than the thriving enterprise it once was. The expansive acreage that Samuel Keller's grandfather had purchased in 1947 now stood barren, its potential withered beneath the unforgiving sun and increasingly alkaline soil that modern agricultural methods had failed to revitalize. Samuel stood at the edge of his last productive field, boots kicking up dust from soil that barely sustained the crops he'd planted with such hope in spring. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. At 42, his sun-weathered face had etched into permanent creases of concern. His broad shoulders, built through decades of relentless physical labor, now slumped with the weight of impending failure. "Getting worse every day, Chief," he said to the loyal German shepherd at his side. The dog whimpered softly, pressing against his leg as they surveyed the dusty slope of the eastern section. 50 acres of land that had resisted cultivation. Since his grandfather's time, the Keller family had weathered economic downturns, adapted to changing agricultural technologies, and survived unpredictable market fluctuations for 3 generations. But 2 years of record drought, unexpectedly, rising water table issues, and steadily increasing equipment costs had pushed Oakridge Valley Farm to the precipice of collapse. The latest meteorological reports suggested no significant rainfall for another 2 months, far too late to save this season's crops. Samuel climbed onto his aging bulldozer, its once bright yellow paint now faded and chipped from years of constant use. The land clearing attachment he'd financed last month, an expense that strained his already precarious budget, waited to be deployed in a final, desperate attempt to make the rocky eastern section viable for irrigation. 50 acres of new ground, he muttered as he fired up the diesel engine. That's what we need if we're going to survive. The bank's latest notification had arrived yesterday, giving him 120 days to make a substantial payment or face foreclosure proceedings. The letter had concluded with a handwritten note mentioning that Meridian Development Corporation had expressed significant interest in acquiring the property, a thinly veiled suggestion that Samuel should consider selling while he still had some negotiating leverage. The eastern slope had frustrated 3 generations of Kellers. His grandfather insisted there was something peculiar about the rock formations there, too orderly to be natural, he'd claimed repeatedly. Samuel's father had simply declared it cursed ground and focused his attention on the western sections instead. But now, with productivity failing across the reliable sections and profit margins disappearing entirely, Samuel had no choice but to attempt what his ancestors had abandoned. Every additional acre under cultivation could mean the difference between keeping or losing the farm that had defined his family for 75 years. The rising dust from the approaching vehicle caught Samuel's attention before he heard the engine. A gleaming black SUV bearing Meridian Development Corporation's distinctive logo navigated the rutted farm road. Rebecca Torres, Meridian's chief acquisition specialist for rural properties, stepped out, her business attire incongruous against the agricultural backdrop. She'd been systematically approaching struggling farmers throughout the county for the past 2 years, acquiring properties for Meridian's ambitious, sustainable community development initiative. "Mr. Keller," she called out with practiced cordiality. "I hope I'm not interrupting your work." Samuel cut the bulldozer engine. "Another offer, Ms. Torres?" She nodded, retrieving a leather portfolio from her vehicle. 30% above our initial proposal. That's the absolute ceiling I've been authorized to offer. The board is eager to finalize acquisitions in this valley before breaking ground on Phase 1 next quarter. Samuel's expression remained carefully neutral as he accepted the document. "Thank you for making the trip out here," Rebecca gestured toward the eastern slope where Samuel had been preparing to work. "Have you considered Dr. Harrington's geological survey results about your property?" Samuel's jaw tightened imperceptibly. Dr. Elijah Harrington, a prominent geologist consulting for Meridian, had been making increasingly determined requests to conduct comprehensive surveys of Oakridge Valley Farm. His latest communication suggested anomalous subterranean formations potentially indicating significant historical infrastructure, a claim Samuel found suspiciously aligned with Meridian's acquisition interests. "I'm not granting Dr. Harrington access to my property," he said, firmly, "not while I still have options." Rebecca's expression softened marginally. "Samuel, I understand this farm represents generations of your family's work, but at some point you need to face reality. That section has never been productive, and Harrington's preliminary scans suggest—" "I'll make it productive," Samuel interrupted. "Today, that's why I've invested in the new equipment." She sighed with practiced empathy. "Just don't wait too long to consider alternatives. Our offer won't remain available indefinitely. The corporation has already acquired the Henderson and Wilson properties to the south." After Rebecca departed, Samuel stood motionless beside his bulldozer, the corporate offer clutched in his hand. Chief pressed against his leg, offering silent companionship in a moment of decision. That evening, after reviewing the farm's financial records and finding no clear path to solvency, Samuel retreated to the attic of the old farmhouse. Dust motes danced in the beam of his flashlight as he located an old wooden trunk tucked beneath the eaves. The trunk had belonged to his grandfather, Edwin Keller, who had established the farm after returning from military service in Europe. Family law maintained that Edwin had used unusual techniques to select this particular property, passing up seemingly more fertile land to purchase Oakridge Valley. Samuel lifted the heavy lid, revealing leather-bound journals, old maps with curious annotations, and several artifacts carefully wrapped in yellowed cloth. He hadn't examined these materials since inheriting the farm, regarding them as family heirlooms rather than practical resources. The earliest journal, dated 1947, detailed his grandfather's methodical search for the perfect property, one that aligned with criteria Samuel had never fully understood until this moment. Samuel's phone rang early the next morning. The local bank manager, Harold Winters, wanted to discuss options regarding the farm's outstanding loans. The conversation was brief but pointed. Meridian Development had approached the bank about potentially acquiring the loan notes on Oakridge Valley Farm. "It's just business, Sam," Harold said, his tone attempting to soften the impact. "But if you're planning to hold on to the property, we'll need to see substantial progress on those payments within the time frame we discussed." After hanging up, Samuel unfolded the survey maps his grandfather had meticulously created. Unlike standard agricultural surveys focusing on soil composition and drainage patterns, Edwin's maps detailed unusual subsurface formations across the eastern section. Notes in the margins referenced consistent geometric anomalies and evidence of deliberate construction. The most revealing entry appeared on pages dated October 1948. The locals dismissed the old stories as mere folklore, tales of an ancient people who built their city beneath the earth after the Great Cataclysm. But my equipment doesn't lie. The eastern slope contains a series of perfectly symmetrical chambers, approximately 30 feet below surface level. Whatever exists down there is neither random nor natural. I have chosen to protect this discovery until I understand its significance." Samuel stared at the page in disbelief. His grandfather had purchased this land specifically because he detected something buried beneath the troublesome eastern section, something he had deliberately kept secret even from his own family. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The rumble of vehicles approaching drew Samuel to the window. 3 Meridian Development SUVs were coming up the drive, followed by what appeared to be a truck carrying ground-penetrating radar equipment. Dr. Harrington had apparently decided not to wait for permission. Samuel strode out to meet them, Chief following protectively at his heels. Dr. Harrington, tall, gaunt, with the perpetually distracted air of an academic, emerged from the lead vehicle. "Mr. Keller," he began without preamble, "I apologize for arriving unannounced, but new data from our satellite imaging has revealed critical information about your property that simply cannot wait." "You're trespassing, Dr. Harrington," Samuel replied evenly. "I haven't granted access for any surveys." Rebecca Torres stepped forward, her professional demeanor firmly in place. "Samuel, please understand, this isn't just about land acquisition anymore. Dr. Harrington believes there may be significant historical artifacts beneath your eastern acreage. Artifacts that could be damaged by agricultural development." "Convenient timing," Samuel observed, "just as I'm preparing to make that land productive." Harrington's expression tightened. "This isn't some corporate strategy, Mr. Keller. I've spent 30 years studying underground structures in this region. What lies beneath your property could revolutionize our understanding of pre-colonial settlements in North America." Samuel maintained his composure, though his mind raced with connections to his grandfather's journals. "If there's something historically significant on my property, I'll handle it appropriately after I've conducted my own investigation." "You're not qualified," Harrington began, but Rebecca quickly intervened. "We're prepared to offer additional compensation for research access," she said, "plus guaranteed farming rights on the unaffected portions of the property under a favorable lease arrangement." Samuel recognized the carefully orchestrated pressure, the academic appeal to historical preservation coupled with the corporate carrot-and-stick approach. What struck him most was their urgency. Why was Meridian suddenly willing to compromise on their development plans? "I'll need time to consider your proposal," he said finally. "Please leave your contact information, and I'll be in touch within." The week after their reluctant departure, Samuel returned to his grandfather's journals with renewed purpose. What exactly had Edwin discovered that now had a major corporation and academic institutions so interested enough to orchestrate what appeared to be a coordinated acquisition strategy spanning years? The afternoon sun was beginning to cast long shadows when Samuel started the bulldozer. Despite the revelations from his grandfather's journals, the farm's financial reality remained unchanged. He needed to make the eastern section productive to save the property, regardless of what might lie beneath it. As he guided the bulldozer toward the slope, Samuel noticed something his grandfather had documented in his surveys: subtle patterns in the rock distribution that seemed too regular to be natural formations. With his attention now attuned to these details, what had previously appeared as random obstacles now revealed themselves as potentially deliberate arrangements. For 3 hours, Samuel carefully cleared rocks and leveled ground, constantly referencing his grandfather's survey maps. He avoided areas Edwin had marked as primary chambers, while focusing on creating viable agricultural space around them. The work was painstaking, requiring more precision than typical land clearing. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, Samuel guided the bulldozer over a section his grandfather had labeled possible access point. The machine lurched suddenly, the blade dropping several inches as the ground beneath partially collapsed. Samuel immediately shut down the engine, heart pounding. Climbing down, he examined the depression created by the bulldozer's weight. Beneath, the displaced soil was what appeared to be a carved stone surface. Not a natural rock formation, but something crafted with evident precision. Decades of soil had concealed it, but now a corner was clearly visible. Samuel worked by hand as daylight faded, carefully removing soil from around the stone. What emerged was unmistakably human-made, a massive stone block with geometric patterns carved into its surface. The patterns were unlike anything Samuel recognized from local indigenous artwork or colonial construction. As he cleared more soil, Samuel realized he was looking at what appeared to be a sealed entrance, an intricately designed doorway deliberately buried beneath the troublesome eastern slope. His grandfather's cryptic surveys suddenly made perfect sense. Edwin Keller hadn't just detected underground chambers. He had found an entire buried structure and had chosen to protect it by keeping its existence secret. The vibration of his phone interrupted Samuel's exploration. A text message from Rebecca Torres. Dr. Harrington's team detected unusual subsurface activity at your property this afternoon. We'll be returning tomorrow morning with county archaeological officials. Please do not disturb the eastern section. The timing couldn't be coincidental. Meridian was monitoring his property, probably using satellite or drone technology, and had detected his discovery almost immediately. The coordinated pressure was intensifying, suggesting that whatever lay beneath Oakridge Valley Farm held value beyond ordinary historical interest. Samuel covered the exposed stonework with tarps and loose soil, making it appear like ordinary land-clearing preparation. As darkness fell, he returned to the farmhouse, his grandfather's journals taking on new urgency. Whatever Edwin had discovered and protected for decades, Samuel now stood as its unwitting guardian, with powerful interests already mobilizing to take control. Samuel spent the night poring over his grandfather's journals, searching for any information that might help him understand what he'd uncovered. Sleep seemed impossible with the knowledge that Meridian would arrive with officials in just hours. The most revealing journal entries came from Edwin's later years, growing increasingly cryptic. April 17, 1963. The vibrations have intensified. Something within the structure is responding to external stimuli. I've sealed the small access point I created and reinforced the covering. Some discoveries must wait for the right moment and the right guardian. Samuel was struck by his grandfather's deliberate choice to conceal rather than explore. What had Edwin detected that warranted such caution? More puzzling were references to vibrations and responses, suggesting that whatever lay beneath, the eastern slope wasn't entirely dormant. By dawn, Samuel had formulated a plan born of necessity and determination. If Meridian and their archaeological team gained control of the discovery, he would lose both his family legacy and whatever his grandfather had spent decades protecting. His only option was to document the find himself, establishing his prior claim before officials arrived. Samuel gathered basic exploration equipment, flashlights, cameras, rope, and his phone for documentation. He also retrieved his grandfather's old military compass and a curious device from the trunk labeled detection apparatus, a handcrafted instrument Edwin had apparently designed himself. As the first light broke over the eastern horizon, Samuel uncovered the stone doorway he'd discovered yesterday. In daylight, the craftsmanship was even more impressive. Precise geometric patterns flowing across the surface in concentric designs that seemed to direct attention toward the center. What had initially appeared to be decorative elements now revealed themselves as a sophisticated locking mechanism. Samuel recalled a passage from his grandfather's journal describing how he had temporarily accessed a small section. The central design functions as a counterweighted pivot when pressure is applied in the correct sequence. The builders designed it to respond to specific input patterns rather than brute force, an elegant security system that has preserved their legacy for centuries. Following his grandfather's notes, Samuel carefully applied pressure to specific points in the geometric pattern. The stone remained immovable at first, decades of soil compaction having seized the ancient mechanism. Samuel retrieved hydraulic equipment from his workshop, using it with extreme caution to apply controlled pressure according to the pattern. After nearly an hour of careful work, a low grinding sound emerged from beneath the stone. Dust trickled from previously invisible seams as the massive block began to pivot on a central axis, revealing a narrow opening into darkness below. Cool, dry air rushed up from the opening, carrying an unfamiliar scent that was neither the mustiness of a natural cave nor the dampness of a typical underground space. Samuel set up lights around the entrance and secured a rope to his bulldozer, creating a makeshift safety line. Chief whined anxiously, clearly disturbed by the opening. "Stay, boy," Samuel commanded, securing the dog to a nearby post with water and shade. "I need you to keep watch." With his phone recording video and Edwin's detection device in hand, Samuel began his descent into the darkness. The entrance opened to a carefully constructed staircase, not roughly hewn steps, but precisely engineered stairs with consistent dimensions, cut from a stone material that didn't match any local geological formations. The craftsmanship suggested tools and techniques far more sophisticated than would be expected from ancient construction. As he descended, Samuel's lights revealed walls covered with intricate carvings, symbols that resembled written language, alongside detailed pictorial representations showing people, celestial objects, and complex geometric designs. The symbols were unfamiliar, matching no indigenous writing systems Samuel had ever seen in regional museums. The staircase descended approximately 30 feet before opening into a vast chamber that stole Samuel's breath. His flashlights couldn't illuminate the full extent of the space, but what they revealed defied all expectations. This wasn't a simple underground structure or storage area. It was an intricately designed space with architectural elements suggesting a functional inhabited environment. Pillars carved with spiral patterns supported a ceiling embedded with materials that subtly reflected his flashlight beam. The floor featured a mosaic design of concentric circles emanating from a central platform. Most astonishing were the preserved artifacts, objects that appeared to be furniture, tools, and devices of unknown purpose, all crafted with extraordinary precision from materials ranging from stone and metal to substances Samuel couldn't identify. "This isn't just a chamber," Samuel whispered into his phone's recording. "This is a room in what appears to be an entire underground complex, a deliberate construction that shows evidence of sophisticated engineering and design principles." As Samuel moved deeper into the chamber, Edwin's detection device began to emit a soft, pulsing tone. The needle on its display swung dramatically toward the chamber's center, where a raised circular platform contained what appeared to be a control station of some kind, a series of geometric shapes arranged in patterns, similar to the door mechanism. Samuel carefully documented everything with photos and video, moving methodically through the chamber. The artifacts showed no signs of typical archaeological deterioration, no significant corrosion, decay, or damage. It was as if the space had been perfectly preserved in a controlled environment rather than simply buried. A doorway on the far side of the chamber opened into a corridor that appeared to extend deep into the earth. Samuel realized with growing amazement that what he'd discovered wasn't just a single chamber, but the entrance to what might be an entire underground complex, perhaps even the city referenced in the local legends his grandfather had documented. Checking the time, Samuel realized he'd been exploring for nearly 2 hours. Meridian and the county officials would likely arrive soon. He needed to return to the surface with enough documentation to establish his discovery before they could take control. As he turned to leave, his light caught something unusual on one wall. a map or diagram etched into a metallic panel. The diagram appeared to show a systematic layout of interconnected chambers extending throughout what would be the entirety of Oakridge Valley's eastern section and beyond. If accurate, the underground structure was far more extensive than even his grandfather had suspected, potentially continuing beneath neighboring properties Meridian had already acquired. The realization struck Samuel with sudden clarity. Meridian's strategic land acquisitions in the valley weren't random development opportunities. They were systematically acquiring properties above this underground complex, piecing together control of whatever lay beneath. His farm wasn't just the last holdout in their development plan. It contained what appeared to be the main entrance to something they'd been searching for all along. As Samuel climbed back toward the surface, his mind raced with implications. The financial threat to his farm now seemed almost secondary to the responsibility of understanding what his family had been unknowingly protecting for generations. Whatever lay beneath Oakridge Valley wasn't just an archaeological curiosity, it represented a discovery that could fundamentally change understanding of what had existed on this land long before recorded history. Emerging into daylight, Samuel found Chief barking alertly toward the farm's entrance. 3 vehicles were approaching. Meridian had arrived earlier than expected. Samuel quickly gathered his documentation equipment and covered the open doorway with tarps and equipment, making it appear as ordinary farm activity. He had minutes at most to decide how to handle the confrontation to come and protect both his farm and the extraordinary discovery beneath it. Samuel had barely secured his exploration equipment when the vehicles pulled up. Dr. Harrington emerged from the lead SUV, followed by Rebecca Torres and a man Samuel didn't recognize wearing a county administration badge. 2 technicians unloaded ground-scanning equipment from the 3rd vehicle. "Mr. Keller," Rebecca called, approaching with practiced cordiality that barely masked her urgency. "I see you've been busy with your land-clearing project." Samuel nodded, positioning himself between them and the tarp-covered entrance. "Just trying to make unproductive land viable before the bank deadline." Dr. Harrington surveyed the disturbed earth with unconcealed interest. "Our satellite imaging detected significant ground disturbance in this exact location yesterday evening. Rather coincidental that you're working precisely where our surveys indicated subterranean anomalies." "My family has farmed this land for 3 generations, Doctor," Samuel replied evenly. "I'm well aware of which sections need attention." The county official stepped forward, extending his hand. "Martin Wells, County Historical Preservation Office. Mr. Keller, we've received an urgent application for emergency archaeological assessment of this property based on potential historical significance. I need to ask if you've encountered any unusual structures or artifacts during your land work." Before Samuel could respond, Chief began barking frantically, drawing everyone's attention to dust rising from the farm's access road. A battered pickup truck approached rapidly, coming to an abrupt stop beside the assembled vehicles. The driver, a woman in her mid-30s with sun-weathered skin and practical field clothes, strode purposefully toward them. "Professor Maya Delgado, Department of Anthropology," she introduced herself, barely acknowledging the others while addressing Samuel directly. "Mr. Keller, I received your grandfather's letter yesterday." Samuel stared in confusion. "My grandfather passed away 15 years ago." Maya nodded. Edwin Keller arranged for a time-delayed communication to be delivered to specific academic departments if certain conditions were ever met on this property. The letter contained detailed information about what might be discovered here. Dr. Harrington's expression darkened. "This is highly irregular, Professor Delgado. The county has already initiated formal assessment procedures through established channels. Channels that conveniently involve exclusive access agreements with Meridian Development," Maya countered, her tone making it clear this wasn't their first confrontation. She turned back to Samuel. Your grandfather was extremely specific about maintaining family control of any discoveries. He reached out to my department because of our reputation for prioritizing site integrity over institutional exploitation. The tension among the assembled group was palpable. Samuel realized he was witnessing not just corporate interest, but an academic power struggle. Dr. Harrington and Meridian clearly had established protocols that Maya Delgado was challenging, based on his grandfather's foresight. Perhaps we should all see exactly what we're discussing, Samuel suggested, making a split-second decision. If he was going to lose control of the discovery, he would at least choose allies who respected his grandfather's wishes. Samuel removed the tarps, revealing the partially opened stone doorway. The collective reaction was immediate. Gasps from the technicians, a satisfied nod from Dr. Harrington, and calculating reassessment from Rebecca Torres. As you can see, Samuel continued, I've discovered what appears to be an engineered entrance to an underground structure. Based on my initial exploration, it extends significantly beyond this access point. You've entered the structure? Dr. Harrington asked sharply. Without proper archaeological protocols or safety measures? This is precisely why immediate professional oversight is essential. Maya Delgado was already kneeling beside the entrance, examining the geometric patterns with obvious expertise. These aren't consistent with any known indigenous construction in this region. The precision engineering and symbolic language suggest a completely undocumented civilization. Martin Wells, clearly overwhelmed by the significance of what he was seeing, pulled out his phone. I need to contact the State Archaeological Authority immediately. This clearly falls under emergency preservation statutes. Rebecca Torres, ever the pragmatist, approached Samuel. This changes our offer significantly, of course. Meridian is prepared to fund comprehensive study of this discovery, while ensuring your family receives appropriate compensation and recognition. Samuel felt the control of the situation slipping away as competing interests mobilized around his discovery. The county official was already discussing cordoning off the entire eastern section. Dr. Harrington had directed his technicians to begin scanning the surrounding area, while Rebecca was already on her phone, presumably updating Meridian. Executives, it was Maya Delgado who recognized his dilemma. She moved closer, speaking quietly. Your grandfather anticipated this moment. His letter included specific information that can help you maintain legal control of this discovery. But we need to establish proper documentation immediately before institutional momentum takes over. The group's attention shifted as one of Harrington's technicians called out from the scanning equipment. Doctor, you need to see this. The subsurface readings show the structure extends at least 600 meters in 3 directions. This isn't just a single chamber, it's an entire complex. Dr. Harrington hurried to examine the readings, his academic excitement momentarily overriding his corporate allegiances. Impossible. These formations show multiple levels, consistent dimensions, and what appear to be designated functional areas. This isn't just an archaeological site, it's a fully developed subterranean installation. Martin Wells was now speaking urgently into his phone, describing the discovery in terms that made it clear county resources were inadequate for the scale of what they were confronting. Rebecca Torres had stepped away from the group, engaged in intense conversation with someone Samuel presumed was high in Meridian's executive structure. Maya caught Samuel's eye and nodded toward the farmhouse, suggesting they needed to speak, and privately. As the others remained absorbed in the initial scans and bureaucratic mobilization, Samuel and Maya retreated toward the house, Chief following protectively. Your grandfather was remarkably prescient, Maya said once they were out of earshot. His letter contained detailed documentation of initial surveys he conducted in the 1950s, along with specific legal instructions for protecting the site. He believed whatever exists beneath your farm represents technology and knowledge from a previously unknown civilization, one that deliberately concealed itself underground. Samuel thought of the map he'd seen on the chamber wall. It's not just beneath my farm. The complex extends under neighboring properties Meridian has already acquired. Maya nodded grimly. That's consistent with the pattern we've observed. Meridian has been systematically purchasing land containing unusual subterranean formations across 3 states. They're not just a development company. They're specifically hunting these sites. But why? Samuel asked. What could they possibly gain from ancient underground structures? Your grandfather had a theory, Maya replied. He detected unusual energy signatures emanating from deep within the complex, signatures that intensified during specific astronomical alignments. He believed the site contains technology operating on principles we don't yet understand. The implications struck Samuel with sudden clarity. The vibrations his grandfather had documented, the mysterious devices preserved within. This wasn't just an archaeological discovery, but potentially a technological one that could explain Meridian's extraordinary interest. We have maybe an hour before institutional machinery takes control, Maya continued pragmatically. Once state authorities arrive with federal archaeological teams, access will be restricted even for the property owner. Your grandfather established legal protection through my department, but we need to implement it immediately. Samuel made a decision. I have documentation from my initial exploration, photos, video, and measurements, and my grandfather's journals contain decades of observations and research. Perfect, Maya said. With those materials and the letter he sent, we can file for independent research protection under the Cultural Heritage Autonomy Act. It won't stop the formal assessment, but it will ensure your family maintains primary authority over research access and prevents any corporate entity from claiming exclusive rights. As they hurried to gather the documentation, Samuel could see through the window that the scene at the discovery site had grown more complex. Additional county vehicles had arrived, and Dr. Harrington was now directing a comprehensive scanning operation across the eastern slope. Rebecca Torres was methodically photographing the entrance, apparently documenting everything for Meridian's records. Samuel realized that his simple act of land clearing had irrevocably changed the trajectory of his life. The financial crisis threatening his farm had suddenly been overshadowed by responsibility for what might be one of the most significant archaeological discoveries in modern history. A discovery his grandfather had intentionally protected until this precise moment. While Maya began organizing the documentation for legal filing, Samuel retrieved his grandfather's journals. What had seemed like the eccentric notes of an amateur enthusiast now revealed themselves as the methodical observations of someone who had understood the significance of what lay beneath Oakridge Valley decades before modern technology could confirm it. The earliest entries documented Edwin's military service in Europe during World War II, where he had been assigned to a specialized unit tasked with recovering cultural artifacts from Nazi storage facilities. One passage particularly caught Samuel's attention. May 3, 1945. Today, we recovered materials unlike anything I've previously encountered. Among the confiscated documents were surveys of similar underground structures found in South America and Asia. The Reich's archaeologists believed these sites originated from the same advanced culture, a civilization that existed before recorded history and possessed knowledge that defies conventional understanding. Most disturbing were the energy readings detected within these structures, readings that correlate with astronomical alignments and may explain the Reich's obsessive interest in their recovery. Later entries revealed how Edwin had used modified military detection equipment to conduct his own searches after returning to America, eventually identifying unusual subsurface anomalies in what would become Oakridge Valley Farm. October 12, 1947. The patterns here match those documented in the European surveys precisely. The geometric arrangement, the depth, and most significantly, the energy signatures that fluctuate with celestial movements. I have secured this land, not for agricultural purposes, though that provides convenient cover, but to protect what lies beneath from those who would exploit it without understanding. Maya looked up from the journal, her expression grave. Your grandfather wasn't just a farmer who stumbled upon something unusual. He was systematically searching for this site based on classified knowledge from his military service. Samuel nodded slowly, the pieces falling into place. And he chose to protect rather than exploit it, even keeping its existence secret from his own family. For good reason, Maya added, showing Samuel her tablet. I've been researching Meridian while you gathered the journals. They're a subsidiary of Halcyon Global Technologies, a corporation specializing in advanced materials and energy systems. Their board includes former military officials and government scientists with backgrounds in classified research. Outside, the activity around the entrance had intensified. Dr. Harrington was now directing the setup of sophisticated monitoring equipment, while Rebecca Torres managed a growing team of personnel arriving in unmarked vehicles. Maya's phone chimed with an incoming message. My department chair has initiated the protection filing. We have temporary research autonomy for 72 hours while the full legal review proceeds. It won't stop the official investigation, but it prevents anyone from removing artifacts or conducting invasive examination without your approval. Samuel's attention was drawn to one of Edwin's later journals, dated just 5 years before his death, July 18th, 1992. The vibrations have intensified significantly during tonight's planetary alignment. The detection equipment indicates synchronized activity from deep within the structure. Not random energy fluctuations, but patterns suggesting deliberate communication or activation sequences. Most remarkably, the symbols I documented near the main entrance illuminated briefly, confirming my theory that the entire complex integrates sophisticated technology with its architectural elements. I've been approached again by representatives from the newly formed Foundation for Historical Technology, clearly a front for the same interests that pursued these sites during the war, now operating under corporate cover. Their persistence confirms my belief that whatever knowledge lies preserved within these chambers must remain protected until humanity develops the wisdom to use it responsibly. As Samuel shared this entry with Maya, her expression shifted from academic interest to deeper concern. The Foundation for Historical Technology was the predecessor organization to Halcyon's archaeological division, the same corporate structure that eventually created Meridian Development. So they've been pursuing this site for over 70 years, Samuel realized, across different organizational identities, but with consistent purpose. Their conversation was interrupted by Chief's alert barking. Through the window, they could see a helicopter approaching from the east, bearing no distinct markings, but clearly headed for the farm. Federal involvement already, Maya noted grimly. Faster than expected. We need to establish our documentation immediately before access becomes restricted. Samuel made a quick decision. There's more below than what I initially documented. My grandfather's journals reference a central chamber that activates during specific astronomical alignments. Based on the reaction from Meridian and now federal authorities, I suspect that's what they're really interested in. When is the next significant alignment? Maya asked, already checking astronomical data on her tablet. Samuel consulted the final pages of Edwin's journal. Based on my calculations, the next major planetary conjunction that would trigger full activation occurs in approximately 28 days. Previous minor alignments have produced observable effects, but the conjunction of Jupiter, Saturn, and the specific lunar phase represents optimal conditions based on recorded energy fluctuations. Maya looked up from her tablet with evident surprise. That's exactly right. There's a rare triple conjunction occurring in 27 days. Your grandfather's observations were remarkably precise. Through the window, they watched as the helicopter landed in the adjacent field. Two individuals in formal attire emerged, immediately approached by Rebecca Torres and Dr. Harrington. The body language suggested a shift in authority, Meridian's representatives deferring to these new arrivals. Department of Energy, Maya identified, zooming in with her tablet's camera. This has officially escalated beyond archaeological interest. They're treating this as an energy technology discovery, not just a historical site. Samuel thought about the chamber he'd explored and the inexplicable preservation of materials that should have deteriorated over centuries. Whatever is down, there operates on principles beyond conventional archaeology. My grandfather understood that decades ago. Maya nodded in agreement. And now we're in a race to document and understand it before institutional forces take complete control. They were interrupted by a firm knock at the door. Martin Wells stood there with one of the newly arrived federal officials, a tall, distinguished woman in her 50s, whose bearing suggested military background despite her civilian clothes. "Mr. Keller," Wells began awkwardly, "this is Director Catherine Blackwood from the Department of Energy's Historical Technology Assessment Division. She needs to speak with you urgently regarding the significance of your discovery." Director. Blackwood extended her hand with professional courtesy that didn't quite reach her calculating eyes. "Mr. Keller, I understand you've conducted initial exploration of the underground structure. What you've discovered appears to be significantly more important than a typical archaeological site. I need to ask that you share all documentation and observations immediately, as this may involve technologies with national security implications." Samuel recognized the carefully constructed pressure, the invocation of national security to circumvent normal procedures and property rights. He exchanged a quick glance with Maya before responding. "Director Blackwood, I'm happy to cooperate with official assessment of the site. However, as Professor Delgado has already established, we've filed for research autonomy protection under the Cultural Heritage Act. Any investigation will need to proceed under those legal parameters." Blackwood's expression cooled noticeably. "Mr. Keller, what lies beneath your property may go well beyond historical artifacts. Initial energy readings suggest technologies that fall under federal jurisdiction regardless of where they're discovered. I strongly advise cooperation rather than legal obstacles." "We're not opposing investigation," Maya interjected smoothly. "We're ensuring it proceeds according to established protocols that protect both scientific integrity and Mr. Keller's legal rights as the property owner." The standoff was momentarily interrupted by one of the technicians calling urgently from the site. Director Blackwood excused herself to address whatever development had occurred, leaving Martin Wells shifting uncomfortably in the doorway. "What aren't they telling us?" Samuel asked him directly. Wells hesitated, his local government role clearly conflicting with the sudden federal interest. "The scanning equipment detected energy signatures unlike anything they've previously documented, not just archaeological anomalies, but active energy patterns emanating from deeper within the structure. That's why the department got involved so quickly. As federal personnel established a perimeter around the entrance, Samuel and Maya retreated to the farmhouse to review their options. The situation was escalating beyond their ability to control. Independently, "We need more specialized expertise," Maya admitted, scrolling through contacts on her phone. "Someone who understands both the archaeological significance and the potential technological implications." A text message alert interrupted her search. The sender was unknown, but the content was alarmingly specific. Blackwood's division isn't what it claims. Previous sites have been classified and stripped. Contact Dr. James Chen, former DOE scientist, 505-721, pass. Tell him Sunlight Protocol is active. Samuel stared at the message. How would anyone know what's happening here already? The same way Meridian knew exactly when you discovered the entrance, Maya reasoned. This site has been monitored for decades by multiple interests. The question is whether this contact is offering genuine help or attempting to manipulate us. After deliberation, they decided to make the call. Dr. Chen answered on the second ring as if he'd been expecting them. Professor Delgado, Mr. Keller. I've been waiting for this call for quite some time. His voice was measured, precise, with the practiced caution of someone accustomed to sensitive communications. How do you know who we are? Samuel asked directly. Because I've been tracking Catherine Blackwood's division for 7 years, since I resigned from it, Chen replied. When her team mobilized so suddenly, with classified scanning equipment only used for very specific applications, I knew another site had been discovered. Satellite imaging identified your farm as the location. What exactly is Blackwood's division? Maya pressed. Officially, it assesses unconventional energy technologies with historical origins. Unofficially, it confiscates and classifies discoveries. The challenge established technological paradigms, particularly those found in structures like the one beneath your farm. Chen paused before continuing. There have been 7 similar sites discovered globally in the past decade. All have been seized under national security protocols, their artifacts removed to classified facilities, and their existence denied in academic circles. I was part of the analysis team until I objected to these practices. What makes these sites so important? Samuel asked, thinking of his grandfather's cryptic notes about energy signatures and celestial alignments. They appear to house technology that operates on principles we don't fully comprehend, energy generation and manipulation systems that function without conventional power sources, materials with properties that defy current scientific understanding, and most significantly, evidence that an advanced civilization deliberately preserved their knowledge by concealing it underground. Why underground? Maya wondered aloud. Protection from whatever cataclysm ended their surface presence, Chen speculated, or perhaps shielding for the technologies themselves. The consistent feature across all sites is their alignment with specific astronomical configurations that appear to trigger or enhance their operational capacity. Through the window, Samuel could see Director Blackwood directing the establishment of what appeared to be a mobile command center. Additional vehicles had arrived, including equipment trucks with satellite communications arrays. They're moving with unusual speed, Chen observed when Samuel described the scene. Typically, they assess for days before this level of mobilization. Something about your site has escalated their response. My grandfather's journals mention an upcoming planetary alignment that would trigger full activation of something within the central chamber, Samuel explained. That would explain it, Chen said grimly. Blackwood's division has been particularly aggressive about securing sites before activation events. I need to see this site myself, along with your grandfather's documentation, before they implement full containment protocols. How quickly can you get here? Maya asked. I'm already en route, Chen replied. 4 hours by car from my current location. But you'll need to maintain access rights until I arrive. Once Blackwood declares a national security exclusion zone, even the property owner can be barred from the site. After ending the call, Samuel and Maya strategized their next steps. They needed to delay Blackwood's complete takeover while documenting as much as possible before restrictions tightened further. Your initial exploration confirms your grandfather's observations about the site's layout and basic features, Maya noted. But we need comprehensive documentation of the central chamber he referenced, the one with the suspected energy technology. Samuel considered their options. The federal team is focused on the main entrance, but my grandfather's journals mention a secondary access point he discovered on the western edge of the structure, one he deliberately concealed to prevent unauthorized access, Maya nodded. That might be our best option. While they're establishing control of the primary entrance, we could document the central chamber through the alternative access. Samuel retrieved the most detailed of Edwin's survey maps, which showed a carefully hidden entrance near an outcropping of rocks that had always been avoided during farming operations. Rocks Samuel had assumed were simply too difficult to remove. Outside, the operation had expanded significantly. Temporary fencing was being installed around a perimeter that encompassed most of the eastern section. Sophisticated monitoring equipment had been positioned at intervals, and personnel in specialized protective gear were preparing to enter the main chamber. We need to move quickly, Samuel decided. They'll eventually expand their security perimeter to encompass the entire property. They gathered essential documentation equipment and Edwin's detection device, which Samuel now recognized as a sophisticated instrument his grandfather had likely adapted from military technology. Chief, sensing their urgency, remained close as they made their way toward the western fields, taking an indirect route through existing crops to avoid obvious observation. The rock formation appeared unremarkable, a natural outcropping that had been incorporated into the property's boundary line. But following Edwin's detailed notes, Samuel identified subtle markers carved into specific stones, markers that would be indistinguishable from natural weathering to anyone not looking for them. Your grandfather was remarkably thorough, Maya observed as Samuel located the hidden mechanism described in the journals, a counterweighted stone that, when properly manipulated, revealed a narrow passage descending at a sharp angle into the earth. He spent decades protecting this site, Samuel replied. Creating this alternative access must have required extraordinary effort. The passage was tight but navigable, clearly designed for concealment rather than convenience. After descending approximately 40 feet through the carefully constructed tunnel, they emerged into what appeared to be a maintenance corridor within the larger underground complex. Unlike the ceremonial grandeur of the main entrance chamber, this area was purely functional, a precisely engineered service passage with what appeared to be access panels set at regular intervals along walls, constructed of an unfamiliar metallic material. Samuel consulted Edwin's detection device, which now displayed active readings much stronger than those recorded near the entrance. The central chamber should be approximately 100 meters in this direction, he indicated, following both the device's guidance and his grandfather's maps. As they moved deeper into the complex, the architecture became increasingly sophisticated. The lighting changed subtly, not from their flashlights, but from the structure itself. Certain sections of wall and ceiling contained embedded materials that emitted a soft, ambient illumination activated by their presence. This isn't phosphorescence or bioluminescence, Maya noted with scientific precision as she documented the phenomenon. The light activates in response to our proximity and follows specific pathways through the structure, almost like a guidance system. The corridor opened into a larger junction where multiple passages converged around a circular chamber. At the center stood what appeared to be a control console, a raised platform containing geometric arrangements similar to those seen at the main entrance, but significantly more complex. Your grandfather described this as an access node, Samuel said, consulting the journals. He believed each of these stations regulated functions for different sections of the complex. Maya carefully photographed the console from multiple angles. The symbols match those from the entrance, but include additional notations. This appears to be a complete writing system, not just decorative or mathematical notation. As they continued toward the central chamber, following both Edwin's maps and the increasingly strong readings on his detection device, they encountered additional evidence of the site's true nature. This wasn't simply an underground dwelling or ceremonial space. It was a fully integrated facility with specialized functional areas. They passed what appeared to be research laboratories with preserved equipment of unfamiliar design, living quarters with furniture engineered from materials that showed no deterioration despite their age, and most remarkably, what Edwin had identified as knowledge repositories. Rooms filled with crystal-like storage devices arranged in precise, geometric patterns. This civilization wasn't just advanced, Maya whispered as they documented these areas. They were systematically preserving their knowledge and technology in a format designed to endure for millennia. As they approached the central chamber, Edwin's device began emitting a steady, pulsing tone. The surrounding architecture had changed character completely, the walls now incorporating spiraling patterns of a material that seemed to capture and redirect light in impossible ways. "According to my grandfather's observations," Samuel said quietly, "we're about to enter what he called the activation chamber, the heart of whatever system this entire complex was designed to house." The central chamber exceeded all expectations. Unlike the functional corridors and specialized rooms they had passed through, this vast circular space rose at least 3 stories high, its domed ceiling embedded with materials that mimicked a night sky, constellations slowly shifting in patterns that Samuel recognized from his grandfather's astronomical notes. At the center stood what could only be described as a technological altar, a raised circular platform surrounded by concentric rings of material that alternated between what appeared to be metal, crystal, and substances neither Samuel nor Maya could identify. The platform itself contained a geometric arrangement of components connected by channels that pulsed with subtle illumination, converging at a central crystalline structure approximately 1 meter in height. "This is far beyond what my grandfather documented," Samuel said in hushed amazement. "He only observed this chamber from a monitoring station. I don't think he ever entered it directly." Maya moved slowly around the perimeter, her academic training momentarily overwhelmed by the implications of what they were seeing. "This isn't just historically significant, Samuel. This represents a technological paradigm completely distinct from our own development path." As they carefully documented the chamber, Samuel noticed that Edwin's detection device had changed its display mode, now showing patterns that corresponded directly to the geometric arrangements of the central mechanism. The pulsing tones had synchronized with subtle vibrations emanating from the floor itself. "Something's happening," he realized. "The system is responding to our presence, or perhaps to the device my grandfather created to monitor it." Before Maya could respond, a low humming began to emanate from the central crystal. Lines of light appeared within its structure, forming 3-dimensional patterns that shifted and evolved with mathematical precision. The concentric rings surrounding the platform began to rotate slowly in alternating directions, though no obvious mechanical components were visible. "It's activating," Maya whispered, hastily capturing video of the phenomenon, not fully but responding to some stimulus we don't understand. The crystalline structure at the center now projected faint symbols into the air above it. Symbols that matched those carved into the walls, but now animated, flowing in sequences that suggested communication rather than decoration. "We need to leave," Samuel decided suddenly, a sense of caution overriding his fascination. "My grandfather was explicit about not triggering activation without understanding the consequences. We've documented enough for Dr. Chen to analyze when he arrives." As if responding to his concern, the system's activity gradually subsided, the projections fading and the rotational movement of the rings slowing to a stop. The chamber returned to its previous state, though Samuel noticed that Edwin's device continued to register elevated energy readings. They carefully retraced their path toward the hidden exit, now moving with greater urgency. The site had demonstrated capabilities beyond passive preservation. It was an active system responding to stimuli in ways they couldn't predict or control. Emerging from the concealed entrance, they immediately sensed that something had changed. On the surface, the sound of additional vehicles and increased activity near the main site was evident even from this distance. Chief, whom they had left watching their exit point, greeted them with anxious alertness rather than his usual enthusiasm. Making their way cautiously back toward the farmhouse through the cover of standing crops, they could see that the operation around the main entrance had expanded dramatically. A secure perimeter now encompassed nearly 10 acres, with sophisticated monitoring equipment positioned at regular intervals. Multiple temporary structures had been erected, housing what appeared to be both scientific equipment and security personnel. Most concerning was the arrival of what Samuel recognized as military transport vehicles, unmarked but unmistakable in their purpose and capacity. This had escalated beyond scientific assessment or archaeological preservation. It now had the distinct character of a classified operation. As they approached the farmhouse from the rear entrance to avoid detection, Samuel's phone vibrated with an incoming call from an unknown number. Answering cautiously, he heard Dr. Chen's voice. "Mr. Keller, I'm approximately 30 minutes from your location, but I need to warn you, Blackwood has implemented Containment Protocol 7. That's a complete information lockdown and site isolation procedure only authorized for discoveries, with critical national security implications." "They've brought in military assets," Samuel confirmed quietly. "That confirms it," Chen replied grimly. "They've detected activation energy signatures. Whatever's in your central chamber has begun responding to stimuli, which accelerates their containment timeline dramatically. They'll be expanding the secure perimeter to encompass your entire property within hours." "We've just returned from documenting the central chamber," Meyer informed him. "We accessed it through an alternative entrance and witnessed partial activation of a mechanism unlike anything in archaeological record." Chen's response conveyed both scientific excitement and practical concern. "That's extraordinary, and precisely why Blackwood's division will now classify everything related to this discovery. I've seen this pattern at 3 previous sites. Once activation is detected, they transition from assessment to complete control, removing all artifacts to secure facilities and implementing information suppression protocols." "What does that mean for my property rights?" Samuel asked, though he suspected the answer. "Technically, they'll invoke national security emergency provisions to establish indefinite control of the site, while offering compensation based on agricultural value only, with no recognition of the discovery's true significance. More concerning is their standard procedure of discrediting witnesses through selective information leaks and institutional pressure." Samuel thought of his grandfather's decades of careful protection. "What can we do? They have federal authority and military resources." "Documentation is our only leverage," Chen answered. "Distributed, verifiable evidence that establishes the discovery's existence and significance before they can implement full information control. I've prepared secure channels for exactly this purpose." Meyer was already transferring their documentation to encrypted storage. "We have comprehensive imagery of both the entrance complex and central chamber, plus Samuel's grandfather's journals documenting decades of observation." "Perfect," Chen replied. "Transmit everything through the secure link I'm sending now. Establish multiple verification timestamps and independent witness documentation before Blackwood can isolate you completely." As they worked to secure their evidence, Samuel observed increasing activity around the farmhouse through the window. Director Blackwood had established what appeared to be a command center in the front yard, with communications equipment and multiple staff coordinating operations. Rebecca Torres remained present, though her role seemed diminished under the federal authority now controlling the site. Most telling was the arrival of a distinguished older man whose bearing commanded immediate deference from everyone present, including Blackwood. He emerged from a black diplomatic vehicle and surveyed the operation with the calculated assessment of someone accustomed to ultimate authority. "That's Director Lawrence Phillips," Chen identified when Samuel described the new arrival. "He oversees the classified division that Blackwood reports to, the Advanced Archaeological Technologies Initiative. His presence confirms this discovery has been elevated to highest priority classification." Samuel watched as Phillips conferred briefly with Blackwood before both turned their attention toward the farmhouse. Their body language made their intentions clear. They were preparing to formally take control of not just the site, but all related information and witnesses. "They're coming to secure us and any documentation," Samuel warned Maya, who was finishing the encrypted transmission of their findings. "Transmission complete," she confirmed. "Multiple secure repositories now contain everything we've documented, with blockchain verification timestamps and distribution to trusted academic nodes that will recognize suppression attempts." Chen's voice conveyed urgency. "I'm 20 minutes out, but may be intercepted before I reach you. If they detain you, which is their standard procedure, reveal nothing about the secondary entrance or the activation you witnessed. Insist on legal representation and maintain that your cooperation is conditional on proper archaeological protocols." As Chen spoke, 3 federal agents approached the farmhouse, accompanied by Blackwood and Phillips. Their deliberate pace and positioning suggested they were implementing a practiced containment procedure, rather than simply making a bureaucratic visit. "We've done what we can to protect the discovery," Samuel said quietly to Maya. "Now we need to protect ourselves while ensuring my grandfather's legacy isn't buried under classification orders." Chief growled softly as a firm knock sounded at the door, followed by Director Phillips's authoritative voice. "Mr. Keller, this is Director Phillips of the Advanced Archaeological Technologies Initiative. We need to speak with you immediately regarding critical security protocols for your property. The confrontation they had been anticipating had arrived. Federal authority preparing to assert complete control over not just the underground complex, but all knowledge of its existence and significance. Whatever his grandfather had protected for decades now faced its greatest threat, not from deterioration or natural forces, but from institutional secrecy aimed at containing discoveries that challenged established paradigms. Samuel opened the door to find Director Phillips, flanked by Blackwood and 2 agents whose professional demeanor barely concealed their security function. Phillips projected the practiced authority of someone accustomed to deference. "Mr. Keller," he began without preamble, "the anomaly beneath your property has been designated a Priority Alpha Research Site under National Security Directive 2375. I've authorized immediate comprehensive containment and assessment protocols." Samuel maintained his composure despite the deliberate intimidation. "Director Phillips, I recognize the significance of what's been discovered, but this remains private property with established research protections already filed through Professor Delgado's department." Phillips's expression conveyed practiced patience. "I appreciate your cooperation thus far, but you need to understand the extraordinary nature of this situation. The energy signatures detected below exceed classification thresholds established by the Department of Energy and Defense Department for Emerging Technology Assessment." He handed Samuel an official document bearing multiple government seals. "This emergency declaration authorizes temporary federal control of the site pending comprehensive security evaluation. You'll receive fair compensation for any disruption to your agricultural operations, of course." Samuel scanned the document, noting its careful wording. It established temporary control while creating open-ended conditions for that control to continue indefinitely. More concerning were provisions regarding information security protocols that essentially prohibited sharing any details about the discovery. This effectively classifies everything about the site, Samuel observed, including my grandfather's decades of research and observation. Your grandfather's materials are of significant interest to our historical analysis division, Blackwood interjected smoothly. We'd like to incorporate them into our assessment to ensure the most comprehensive understanding of the site's development. Maya stepped forward. We've already filed comprehensive documentation with the Cultural Heritage Preservation Registry, establishing public record of this discovery's archaeological significance before any classification restrictions. The momentary tightening around Phillips's eyes revealed this information disrupted their standard containment procedure. Classification could control future information, but couldn't erase what had already been properly documented in academic and public records. Professor Delgado, Phillips acknowledged with recalibrated approach, your academic interest is understandable, but you've potentially encountered technology with significant national security implications. We'll need you to sign comprehensive confidentiality agreements regarding anything you've observed. I've only documented archaeological features consistent with established academic protocols, Maya replied carefully. Any technological implications would require specialized expertise beyond my field to evaluate properly. Samuel recognized their strategically ambiguous answers were buying time while avoiding direct confrontation with federal authority. They needed to maintain access to the site until Dr. Chen arrived with additional leverage and expertise. We're not opposing proper assessment, Samuel offered, but my family has been stewards of this land for generations. My grandfather documented this site for decades with the specific intention of ensuring it would be studied appropriately rather than simply classified. Phillips considered this measured resistance. Your grandfather appears to have possessed unusual insight into the site's significance. Our records indicate no formal archaeological or technical training in his background. He was more qualified than his official records suggest, Samuel responded, thinking of the wartime experience Edwin had documented in his private journals. And he was explicit about maintaining family oversight of any investigation. Director Phillips glanced at his watch, making a decision. I'm authorizing full perimeter establishment and preliminary assessment protocols. Mr. Keller, you and Professor Delgado will retain supervised access to the main research area while our technical team completes initial security evaluation. Once those protocols are established, we can discuss more permanent arrangements. This compromise, while falling short of their hopes, at least maintained their presence at the site. As Phillips and Blackwood departed to oversee the expanding operation, leaving one agent stationed discreetly outside the farmhouse, Samuel and Maya conferred quietly. They're implementing standard containment sequencing, Maya observed. First establishing physical control of the site, then information control through classification, followed by narrative control by managing how the discovery is characterized to anyone who might have partial knowledge. Samuel nodded, but they're proceeding more cautiously than Chen suggested they might. Our preemptive documentation seems to have disrupted their usual approach. Phillips is recalibrating, Maya agreed. Typically, these operations proceed with minimal external awareness. Having established academic documentation and distributed evidence changes their risk calculation. Samuel's phone vibrated with a text from Chen. Intercepted at roadblock. Credentials questioned. Alternative approach. Needed. Activation timing critical. Trust Edwin's protocols. The message confirmed their fears. Blackwood's team was systematically isolating the site from independent expertise. More concerning was Chen's emphasis on activation timing, suggesting the planetary alignment Edwin had documented held greater significance than they had initially understood. Samuel returned to his grandfather's final journal, searching for additional guidance. The entries from Edwin's last years revealed growing concern about preventing premature activation of the central chamber's mechanism. April 3rd, 1993. The alignment approaches. Each preliminary celestial configuration produces stronger energy. Signatures from the central mechanism. What was designed as a preservation system could easily become something more volatile if activated without proper understanding. I've implemented additional safeguards at access points, but these will eventually be overcome by determined investigation. The final protection must be knowledge itself, distributed to those who will recognize responsibility over opportunity. The journal's final pages contained Edwin's contingency plans, including the time-delayed message to Maya's department and detailed instructions for what he called controlled demonstration protocols if the site faced institutional seizure. My grandfather anticipated this exact scenario, Samuel realized. He created a deliberate strategy for ensuring the site couldn't be quietly disappeared into classified status. Maya studied the instructions with growing appreciation for Edwin's foresight. He wasn't just documenting the site, he was creating a multi-generational protection strategy that would activate precisely when needed. Through the window, they could see the operation continuing to expand. Additional technical equipment was being installed around the main entrance, and security personnel had established a perimeter that now encompassed most of the farm's eastern section. Director Phillips remained on site, consulting with various technical specialists while maintaining regular communication through a secure satellite link. What they couldn't see, but Edwin's journals had documented meticulously, was the network of monitoring systems their activity had triggered within the underground complex. The partial activation they had witnessed in the central chamber wasn't an isolated response, but the initial phase of a systematic process designed to evaluate those who had discovered the site. According to these notes, Samuel said, reviewing Edwin's protocols, the central mechanism doesn't just respond to celestial alignments, it also assesses interaction patterns with those who access the chambers, almost like a sophisticated security system designed to determine intent and capability. Maya considered this revelation. That explains the response we experienced. It was evaluating us, and it explains why Blackwood's team detected energy signatures so quickly after they began their assessment. The system is actively monitoring all interaction. This understanding changed their strategic calculation significantly. The underground complex wasn't simply a passive archaeological discovery, but an active technological system gradually awakening after centuries of dormancy, responding to both cosmic conditions and human interaction in ways neither Blackwood's team nor they fully comprehended. We need Chen's expertise, Maya concluded. Without understanding how this activation sequence progresses, we risk either triggering unintended consequences or allowing Blackwood's team to mishandle technology. They're approaching purely from a national security perspective. Samuel studied the farm's topography on a satellite map, identifying potential alternative approaches that would bypass the main security perimeter. There's a maintenance access road through the western property line that connects to county land. If Chen could approach through that route after dark, he might avoid the checkpoints they've established on main roads. As they refined this strategy, a new complication emerged. Rebecca Torres appeared at the farmhouse, her corporate demeanor replaced by unexpected urgency. "Mr. Keller," she began once Samuel opened the door, "I need to speak with you privately, regarding Meridian's knowledge of what you've discovered." Samuel hesitated, sensing this wasn't the standard corporate approach she'd presented previously. "Ms. Torres, I'm not in a position to negotiate property rights given the federal presence. This isn't about acquisition anymore," she replied, glancing cautiously at the federal agent positioned nearby. "It's about warning you. Meridian isn't just a development company. We've been researching these sites for decades. What lies beneath? Your farm isn't unique, but this particular site has capabilities the others don't. Capabilities that become particularly significant during the approaching alignment." Her unexpected shift from adversary to potential ally introduced a new dimension to the already complex situation. Whatever corporate interest had initially motivated Meridian's pursuit of the property, Rebecca now appeared to be operating from different priorities, perhaps breaking from official corporate position to share critical information. Samuel led Rebecca into the kitchen, where they could speak with minimal chance of being overheard by the agent stationed outside. Maya joined them, her academic skepticism balanced by pragmatic recognition that they needed all possible allies. "Meridian has documented 7 similar sites globally," Rebecca explained in hushed tones. "Each contains variations of the same core technology, but preliminary analysis suggests this location serves as a hub, a central node in what appears to be a distributed network." "Why the sudden transparency?" Samuel asked. "Until today, Meridian was focused on acquiring my property through any means possible." Rebecca's professional facade cracked slightly, revealing genuine concern. "Because Blackwood's division has mishandled similar technology at 2 previous sites, with catastrophic consequences that never reached public awareness. Their approach prioritizes weapons applications over understanding fundamental principles." She glanced toward the window where federal operations continued to expand. Dr. Harrington was initially hired to locate these sites for legitimate research. When he realized Meridian's board had formed a partnership with Blackwood's division, he began working with a separate faction within our organization, researchers committed to transparent scientific study rather than classified exploitation. This revelation aligned with the divided motivations Chen had described within the government's approach to these discoveries. Not monolithic organizations pursuing unified agendas, but competing factions with fundamentally different priorities regarding how such technology should be approached. The approaching alignment isn't just astronomically significant, Rebecca continued. Based on data from other sites, it represents an activation threshold. The central mechanisms appear designed to fully engage during specific celestial configurations that occur approximately every 89 years. Maya connected this to Edwin's observations. Samuel's grandfather documented energy fluctuations correlating with minor alignments, but theorized that major conjunctions would trigger what he called primary functionality. Rebecca nodded. The last major alignment coincided with unusual energy phenomena documented across several sites in 1936, phenomena that attracted certain government and private interests to begin systematically searching for these locations. Outside, they could see Director Phillips organizing what appeared to be an expanded technical assessment team. Additional equipment was being positioned around the entrance, including what Rebecca identified as resonance field generators, specialized technology designed to measure and potentially influence energy patterns. "They're accelerating their timeline," she observed. "Standard protocol would involve weeks of careful assessment before deploying field manipulation equipment. They must have detected significant activation markers." "Our visit to the central chamber," Samuel acknowledged. "The mechanism responded to our presence, or possibly to my grandfather's detection device." Rebecca's expression conveyed both scientific interest and practical alarm. "That would explain their urgency. If the system has begun pre-activation, sequencing, Blackwood's team will attempt to control or redirect the process rather than simply observing it. To what end? Maya asked. What functionality do these sites actually provide that justifies this level of interest? Energy generation, Rebecca answered simply. Each site appears designed to harness and transform energy in ways that operate outside conventional physics. The military applications are obvious, but Harrington's research suggests something more profound, a sustainable energy paradigm that was deliberately preserved by its creators during some ancient crisis. This aligned with Samuel's grandfather's theories while expanding their significance beyond archaeological curiosity to world-changing technology. Technology that powerful interests now race to control before the approaching alignment. There, strategic planning was interrupted by commotion outside. Through the window, they could see Dr. Chen being escorted toward the command center by security personnel. Rather than being detained, he appeared to be engaged in professional conversation with Director Phillips, an unexpected development given Chen's warning about likely interception. "That's not good," Rebecca observed. "Chen's expertise makes him valuable, but Blackwood would only allow his involvement if they believed they could control the narrative." Samuel's phone vibrated with a message from an unknown number. Operation compromised. Chen leveraging limited access to maintain scientific protocols. Backup plan active. Check grandfather's final contingency instructions. The initial H, suggested Harrington, indicating that Dr. Chen wasn't working alone, but part of a coordinated effort to ensure independent oversight of the discovery. This aligned with Rebecca's revelation about competing factions within both government and corporate structures. "We need to review my grandfather's final protocols," Samuel decided, retrieving the journal containing Edwin's most detailed contingency plans. The instructions were explicit. If institutional containment became inevitable, Edwin had established a fail-safe mechanism designed to ensure the site couldn't be silently classified and exploited. He had integrated a distributed activation system that would publicly demonstrate the technology's existence while withholding its most critical components from any single controlling entity. As night fell over Oakridge Valley Farm, the confrontation between competing interests continued to escalate. Blackwood's team had established comprehensive monitoring around the main entrance while beginning preliminary exploration of the chambers beyond. Dr. Chen had secured limited participation in this assessment, providing some independent observation. But clearly constrained by federal protocols, Samuel, Maya, and now Rebecca represented the last hope for Edwin's vision of responsible stewardship, protection that prioritized understanding over exploitation and public knowledge over institutional secrecy. The approaching alignment promised not just astronomical significance, but a potential technological activation that could transform human understanding of energy and perhaps history itself. With federal control tightening hourly and the alignment approaching, they faced an impossible choice: surrender to institutional containment or implement Edwin's final contingency, a plan designed to prevent exploitation but carrying its own significant risks. Under cover of darkness, Samuel led Maya and Rebecca to a location his grandfather had marked as Junction Alpha on his most detailed maps, a seemingly ordinary storm cellar near the old barn that Edwin had repurposed decades ago as a monitoring station. Unlike the hidden secondary entrance, this location had been designed not for access to the underground complex, but for implementing Edwin's contingency protocols. The small underground room contained antiquated but meticulously maintained equipment. Monitoring systems Edwin had adapted from military technology and maintained until his final years. At the center stood what he had labeled the contingency interface, a device physically connected to the underground complex through shielded conduits that had been disguised as ordinary farm irrigation lines. My grandfather created this as a fail-safe, Samuel explained, powering up the system using the precise sequence described in the journals. He believed the technology below was too significant to be controlled by any single entity, governmental or private. The monitoring equipment activated with surprising efficiency despite its age, displays showing real-time data from sensors Edwin had strategically positioned throughout the underground complex decades earlier. Most concerning were readings from the central chamber, where energy signatures had intensified significantly since their visit. Blackwood's team is actively probing the central mechanism, Rebecca observed, interpreting the data patterns. These energy fluctuations suggest they're attempting to artificially accelerate the activation sequence rather than simply observing it. Exactly what my grandfather feared, Samuel confirmed. His contingency protocol was designed specifically to prevent premature manipulation of technology that wasn't fully understood. The monitoring system showed Blackwood's team had established a comprehensive technical operation around the central chamber, with specialized equipment positioned to measure and potentially influence the energy patterns emanating from the ancient mechanism. Dr. Chen was visible on one monitor, clearly attempting to moderate their approach while operating under constraints. The alignment is 26 days away, Maya noted. Why are they pushing for activation now, rather than waiting for natural conditions? Control, Rebecca answered grimly. Allowing natural activation under the full alignment might trigger capabilities they can't direct or contain. They're attempting to initiate a partial activation they can manage and potentially weaponize. Samuel studied his grandfather's contingency instructions. Edwin had created a graduated response system, a series of increasingly significant interventions designed to protect the site's integrity depending on the threat level. The first level simply involved revealing the site's existence through distributed documentation, which they had already implemented. The second involved demonstrating its technological significance through controlled energy releases that couldn't be dismissed as natural phenomena. The most drastic measure, which Edwin had labeled Protocol Omega, would trigger a system-wide hibernation mode that would render the technology temporarily inert, preventing activation by any means until the next major alignment cycle decades in the future. My grandfather believed this technology was left as a legacy for humanity's benefit, not as a weapon or tool for control, Samuel said quietly. His ultimate contingency was designed to deny access to anyone who approached it with the wrong intentions, even if that meant delaying its benefits for another generation. As they debated which level of intervention was warranted, the monitoring system suddenly displayed alarming new data. Blackwood's team had initiated what appeared to be a resonance field designed to artificially stimulate the central mechanism's energy production capabilities. They're forcing activation, Rebecca warned, without understanding the safeguards or limitations. This is exactly what caused catastrophic outcomes at previous sites. The decision point had arrived sooner than they had anticipated. With Blackwood's team actively manipulating technology they didn't fully comprehend, Samuel faced the choice his grandfather had prepared for, but hoped would never be necessary. Implementing Protocol Omega to prevent potentially devastating consequences from premature activation. We need to implement at least Level 2 intervention, Samuel decided, accessing the contingency controls. Show them this technology can't be quietly classified by demonstrating its capabilities beyond their containment perimeter. Following Edwin's detailed instructions, Samuel activated a carefully designed protocol that triggered secondary nodes positioned throughout the underground complex. These nodes had been specifically configured to generate visible energy phenomena that would extend beyond the federal security perimeter, creating undeniable evidence of extraordinary technology that couldn't be dismissed or contained. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The monitoring system showed coordinated energy pulses radiating outward from the central chamber along pathways Edwin had mapped decades earlier. These pulses reached subsurface nodes beneath neighboring properties now owned by Meridian but containing components of the larger integrated system. Brilliant, Maya breathed, watching as the energy signatures created visible atmospheric phenomena above the farm, luminous patterns that pulsed in geometric formations visible for miles. Your grandfather ensured the technology couldn't be hidden by extending its functional components beyond any containment perimeter. The federal operation erupted into frantic activity. Blackwood's team scrambled to understand the sudden system-wide response, while Director Phillips directed resources toward identifying the source of the unexpected activation. "They'll trace this location eventually," Rebecca warned. "This monitoring station isn't shielded against their detection equipment." "It doesn't need to be," Samuel replied. "My grandfather's goal wasn't permanent interference, but creating a public record too significant to disappear into classified archives." On the monitors, they could see Dr. Chen leveraging the confusion to access critical data from the central chamber, documenting the technology's core functions, while Blackwood's team was distracted by the external manifestations. He was implementing his part of a coordinated scientific documentation strategy, even while appearing to cooperate with federal protocols. The atmospheric phenomena intensified, creating patterns that corresponded directly to the astronomical alignments Edwin had documented, a visible demonstration of how the technology responded to celestial configurations. Local residents would be witnessing unexplainable lights above Oakridge Valley, while scientific instruments across the region would be recording energy signatures impossible to attribute to natural causes. This creates exactly the kind of public awareness that prevents complete classification, Maya noted. Too many independent witnesses and recordings to effectively suppress. Director Phillips appeared on one monitor, issuing urgent containment orders while simultaneously contacting superiors for guidance on managing a situation rapidly escalating beyond standard protocols. The carefully controlled operation was transforming into crisis management as the ancient technology demonstrated capabilities exceeding their anticipations. Samuel monitored the central chamber readings carefully, prepared to implement protocol Omega if Blackwood's team pushed toward dangerous manipulation levels. The system was demonstrating remarkable capabilities while maintaining internal safeguards, exactly as Edwin had predicted it would respond to interference attempts. "Look at these energy conversion patterns," Rebecca observed with scientific wonder. "The system isn't just generating energy, it's transforming ambient environmental energy into forms that defy conventional physics. This isn't weapon technology, it's a sustainable energy paradigm that operates on principles we're only beginning to theorize." This revelation confirmed Edwin's deepest beliefs about the technology's purpose. Not a military asset to be weaponized, but a transformative energy system designed by an advanced civilization and deliberately preserved for future discovery when humanity had developed sufficient understanding to use it responsibly. As federal personnel began systematic searches beyond their original containment perimeter, clearly attempting to locate the source of the intervention, Samuel prepared for direct confrontation. His grandfather's contingency plans had anticipated this moment, the inevitable clash between institutional secrecy and the public's right to transformative knowledge that could benefit humanity. 6 months after the night of luminous phenomena, above Oakridge Valley Farm, Samuel stood on his eastern slope, watching researchers from 3 universities carefully documenting aspects of the underground complex. The massive security operation had been replaced by a collaborative scientific initiative that included both government researchers and independent academic teams, a compromise born from circumstances that had spiraled beyond any single entity's control. The Oakridge anomaly, as it had become known in scientific circles and public discourse, had proved impossible to classify or contain. Thousands of witnesses had observed and recorded the energy phenomena, while Dr. Chen and other independent scientists had ensured comprehensive documentation reached appropriate academic institutions before containment protocols could be fully implemented. Most significantly, the distributed nature of the technology, extending beneath multiple properties and requiring specific astronomical conditions for full activation, had made exclusive control physically impossible. No single organization, governmental or private, could claim complete authority over a system deliberately designed to resist centralized control. "Your grandfather would be proud," Maya observed, joining Samuel as they watched a team of archaeologists, documenting the intricate symbolic language that covered the central chamber walls. His protection strategy worked exactly as intended, preserving the discovery until it could be properly understood and shared. The farm itself had been transformed as well. Rather than facing foreclosure, Oakridge Valley now operated as both a working agricultural enterprise and the administrative center for what had become the Keller Institute for Alternative Energy Research, a foundation established through a unique collaboration between academic institutions, reformed government programs, and Meridian's research division. "We've only begun to understand the principles involved," Samuel acknowledged. "But already, the energy conversion concepts derived from the central mechanism have revolutionized theoretical physics and launched practical applications that could transform global energy systems within a decade." Director Blackwood's division had been reorganized under congressional oversight following public revelations about previous classification abuses. Director Phillips had ultimately chosen scientific integrity over institutional secrecy, becoming an unexpected ally in establishing transparent research protocols. Dr. Chen now led the primary scientific assessment team, ensuring methodical understanding took precedence over hasty application. Most remarkable was the confirmation that the underground complex represented exactly what Edwin had theorized: a deliberately preserved repository of advanced knowledge, created by an ancient civilization that had recognized the cyclical nature of human development and technological capacity. Rather than weapons or tools of control, they had left a legacy of sustainable energy principles designed to be discovered when humanity faced critical resource challenges. As Samuel looked across what had once been the troublesome eastern slope, now transformed into the world's most significant archaeological and technological research site, he reflected on how his desperate attempt to save his family farm had instead revealed something that might help save much more. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.